Temperatures on Earth will shoot past a key danger point unless greenhouse gas emissions fall faster than countries have committed, the world's top body of climate scientists says, warning of the consequences of inaction, but also noting hopeful signs of progress. UN Secretary-General António Guterres said Tuesday's report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change revealed a litany of broken climate promises by governments and corporations, accusing them of stoking global warming by clinging to harmful fossil fuels. It is a file of shame, cataloguing the empty pledges that put us firmly on track towards an unlivable world, he said. Large icebergs float away as the sun rises near Kulusuk, Greenland. Governments agreed in the 2015 Paris Accord to keep global warming well below 2°C this century, ideally no more than 1.5°C. Yet temperatures have already increased by more than 1.1°C since pre-industrial times, resulting in measurable increases in disasters, such as flash floods, prolonged droughts, more intense hurricanes and longer-burning wildfires, putting human lives in danger and costing governments hundreds of billions of dollars to confront. Projected global emissions from place limiting global warming to 1.5°C beyond reach, and make it harder, after 2030 to limit warming to 2°C, the panel said. In other words, the report's co-chair, James Skee of Imperial College London, told the Associated Press, "If we continue acting as we are now, we're not even going to limit warming to 2 degrees, never mind 1.5 degrees." Joe Biden calls for Vladimir Putin to face war crimes trial over reported Ukraine atrocities. Tourists walk on the Perito Moreno Glacier at Los Glaciares National Park, near El Calafate, Argentina. Ongoing investments in fossil fuel infrastructure and clearing large swathes of forest for agriculture undermine the massive curbs in emissions needed to meet the Paris goal, the report found. To keep the 1.5-degree limit agreed in Paris within reach, we need to cut global emissions by 45% this decade, Mr. Guterres said. But current climate pledges would mean a 14% increase in emissions. In a summary negotiated with governments over the past 2 weeks, the panel concluded that returning warming to 1.5°C by 2100 would require removing vast amounts of carbon dioxide, the main greenhouse gas, from the atmosphere. Many experts say this is unfeasible with current technologies, and even if it could be done, it would be far costlier than preventing the emissions in the first place. Pumpjacks work in a field near Lovington. The report's authors said they had high confidence that unless countries step up their efforts to cut greenhouse gas emissions, the planet will on average be 2.4°C to 3.5°C warmer by the end of the century, a level experts say is sure to cause severe impacts for much of the world's population. We are on a pathway to global warming of more than double the 1.5-degree limit agreed in Paris, said Mr. Guterres. Some government and business leaders are saying one thing, but doing another. Simply put, they are lying, he added. And the results will be catastrophic. Despite the tough words by Mr. Guterres and report co-chairs, the full report, numbering thousands of pages condensed into a summary by governments and scientists, doesn't single out individual countries for blame. Wind turbines stand in front of the rising sun in Frankfurt, Germany. However, the figures show much of the carbon dioxide already in the atmosphere was released by rich countries that were the first to burn coal, oil and gas when the Industrial Revolution really got going in the 1850s. The UN panel said about 40% of emissions since then came from Europe and North America. Just over 12% can be attributed to East Asia, which includes China. The country took over the position as world's top emitter from the United States in the mid-2000s. The report isn't without some hope, however. Its authors highlight myriad ways in which the world can be brought back on track to 2°C or even, with great effort, return to 1.5°C after that threshold has been passed. This could require measures such as the removal of CO2 from the atmosphere with natural or artificial means, but also potentially risky technologies such as pumping aerosols into the sky to reflect sunlight. Smoke and steam rise from a coal processing plant in Hejian in central China's Shaanxi province. Among the solutions recommended are a rapid shift away from fossil fuels toward renewable energy such as solar and wind, the electrification of transport, more efficient use of resources, and massive financial support for poor countries unable to pay for such measures without help. One move often described as low-hanging fruit by scientists is to plug methane leaks from mines, wells and landfills that release the potent, but short-lived greenhouse gas into the atmosphere. A pact forged between the United States and China at last year's UN climate conference in Glasgow aims to do just that. You can see the first signs that the actions that people are taking are beginning to make a difference, said Dr. Ski, the panel's co-chair. The big message: we've got human activities got us into this problem, and human agency can actually get us out of it again, he said. The panel's reports have become increasingly blunt since the first one was 1990, and the latest may be the last before the planet passes 1.5 C of warming, Dr. Ski told the AP. Last August, it said climate change caused by humans was an established fact, and warned that some effects of global warming are already inevitable. In late February, the panel published a report that outlined how further temperature increases will multiply the risk of floods, storms, drought and heat waves worldwide. A man carries bags of onions on a flooded street in Xinjiang in central China's Henan province. Still, the British government's former chief science advisor David King, who wasn't involved in writing the report, said there are optimistic assumptions about how much CO2 the world can afford to emit. The UN panel suggests there's still a carbon budget of 500 billion metric tons that can be emitted before hitting the 1.5 C threshold. We don't actually have a remaining carbon budget to burn, said Mr. King, who now chairs the Climate Crisis Advisory Group. It's just the reverse. We've already done too much in the way of putting greenhouse gases up there, he said, arguing that the IPCC's calculation omits new risks and potentially self-reinforcing effects already happening in some places, such as the increased absorption of heat into the oceans from sea ice loss and the release of methane as permafrost melts, he said. Mining is in progress at an open-cast mine near Dhanbad, an eastern Indian city in Jharkhand state. Such warnings were echoed by Mr. Guterres, citing scientists' warnings that the planet is moving perilously close to tipping points that could lead to cascading and irreversible climate impacts. But high-emitting governments and corporations are not just turning a blind eye, they are adding fuel to the flames, he said, calling for an end to further coal, oil and gas extraction that the report said might have to be abandoned anyway, resulting in losses of trillions of dollars. In new fossil fuels infrastructure is moral and economic madness, he said Guterres. Vulnerable nations, said the report, showed big polluters have to step up their efforts. We are looking to the G20, to the world's biggest emitters, to set ambitious targets ahead of COP27, and to reach those targets by investing in renewables, cutting out coal and fossil fuel subsidies, said Tina Steege, climate envoy for the Marshall Islands.